Tonight's public hearing is the first of two that are going to be devoted to gathering ideas from the community about dividing our district into 5 trustee election areas of roughly equal populations. And an important element of this process is identifying what are called communities of interest that would benefit from being brought together and kept together for representation purposes. We're going to hear tonight from a representative of the firm we've retained to assist us with this process, Redistricting Partners. We're then going to invite community members to speak. I want to assure those who are participating now and who will be participating in the future, the board wants to hear from all of our communities as we move forward to establish these boundaries. We welcome your ideas and comments and want this to be a community-driven process. There are many ways to participate in this process besides the public sharing your thoughts at public hearings. You can help identify communities of interest by taking a survey or by using a mapping tool, which we will soon have available on our website. And in addition, there are many resources and a lot of information that is available on the district's website. Just go to the homepage of the district and click on the trustee area elections link, which is pretty prominent on the homepage of the district. I also want to assure the public and everyone else that all board discussions with redistricting partners, our consultants, about trustee boundary lines will take place at public meetings. All draft maps will be posted on the website for public review and also for comment. And the board is committed to an open, transparent, and public process. Our next public hearing after tonight is going to be on October 4th, again at 7 o'clock. It will also be devoted to receiving public comments about communities of interest and other considerations about drawing trustee areas. After community members have spoken, at that time, we're going to ask board members also to share their thoughts and to give our consultants some direction about how to begin drawing the draft boundary maps. And beginning with that meeting, unless Governor Newsom extends the emergency order allowing virtual meetings like this one, that next meeting on October 4th will actually be in person at the district office. When it comes time, Redistricting Partners is going to submit multiple drafts, and that will be by November for public review and comment. Those maps will be based on information and ideas provided by the board and the public at these hearings, and will follow established districting principles, the principles around configuring trustee areas. And maps that the public submits will also be posted and available for public review. Public hearings on draft maps are scheduled to take place on December 13th and January 10th, with a final decision on trustee areas on February 14th, board action on February 14th. The new election system will then be implemented over 2 election cycles, starting in November of 2022. So with that as an introduction, I'm going to now turn this over to Liz Stitt, who is a representative of Redistricting Partners, to help us move through this initial public hearing. Liz, it's all yours.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here with everyone. This is a very exciting time to district. Let me start sharing my screen. 1 second. All right. Well, thanks again for having me here. Tonight is the first community outreach meeting for Foothill-De Community College District. And this absolutely is a public process Our maps will be better with as much public testimony as possible. So I really encourage folks to think about their communities of interest, and you'll see the many ways that you can give your own public testimony. So things that we're going to be quickly covering tonight, the California Voting Rights Act, what it is, why it's important, what is districting, the traditional districting, redistricting principles that help guide us in this process, the districting timeline for the community college district. Of course, we'll be talking about communities of interest and why that's important in this process. Then we'll get into Districtor, which is the mapping tool, and I'll give a presentation on how to use that at the end of this whole thing. And then we'll talk about the many ways that you can give your own public testimony on communities of interest. And of course, we'll talk about the population. We have the legacy data. We don't have the finalized data yet. We're expecting it to come out around September 20th. But in the meantime, we do have the legacy data to go off of for 2020. And then we'll end it with the public hearing schedule. So let's get into it.
Liz, just to be clear, the legacy data you're referring to is census data, correct?
That's right, yes. And I'll talk a little bit more about this at the end, but the legacy data is basically what the Census Bureau gives us, and we have one more step in the process before that data is finalized. And so the California Voting Rights Act, this is a state law. It essentially prohibits at-large election systems in local governments if there are racially polarized voting. And by at large, it's defined as anything other than a system in which an elected official lives in a district and is only elected by members of that district. So that's why we're going to 5 seats for Foothill-De. And then racially polarized voting, it's defined as differences in voting patterns, which can be shown to be correlated to race, religion, national origin, or membership in any other protected class. So for example, if there is an ethnic group that votes strongly for one party or candidate in the past, and the another, say the white population votes polarized in opposite direction, then that would be considered racially polarized voting. And so the CVRA, it takes the Federal Voting Rights Act and goes beyond those. There are 2 key provisions here that we need to think about. So while the federal law uses majority minority districts as a standard for vulnerability, the CVRA only requires ability to influence. And of course, the CVRA does require that plaintiffs get full reimbursement for legal fees associated with any successful challenge. But these can be lessened or eliminated if the district follows strict and prompt process for districting, known as safe harbor provisions. And so districting is simply the process of creating election district boundaries. It essentially does 2 things. It tells you who is eligible to run for office and who can vote for that election. So you have to live in the district, and you have to run for office, and you have to live in the district to vote for that office holder. And those are things that districting does do. These are things that districting doesn't necessarily do. So how the college decides to govern. The college can still work to achieve goals that benefit the college as a whole rather than the interests of any single district. We've gotten concerns in the past about, does going to districts mean that we're going to create mini fiefdoms? when actually we've seen in the past at-large districts often can create circumstances where trustees are elected with a large constituency group, and they sort of view that as their fiefdom. So we've seen the opposite happen as well. It's more of a cultural issue. So if the board wants to work together to pursue agendas that are for the entire district, or if the board wants to work together to pursue issues that are for their own district, that's a cultural issue that the board will have to work with. But that shouldn't be a result of districting. And so these are the traditional districting principles that have been upheld by the Supreme Court. They are in our state law. This is a list of ranked criteria under the California Fair Maps Act. While it doesn't apply to, it really only applies to cities and counties, but these are good practices that we'll be following as well. So first and foremost, relatively equal size. And we're talking about people, not citizens, not voters. We're talking about the population as a whole. So each district has to be relatively equal. Contiguous. So contiguous is really only a word that you're going to hear in redistricting. It basically means that you keep the district whole and that you could draw it with one line. Maintain communities of interest. We're going to talk a little bit more about this, but real quick, a definition of communities of interest includes a group of people, a neighborhood, a community who have similar policy concerns and would benefit from being maintained in a single district. And next, follow city, county, local government lines when practicable. And then finally, keep districts compact, and that's in appearance and function, not necessarily small. And so let's get back to maintain communities of interest. So essentially, another good way of thinking about communities of interest is they're the building blocks of districts. So we're talking about communities, neighborhoods, and keeping them together to not dilute their voices when it comes to voting or contacting their representatives. So communities of interest could include ethnic or language minorities or other groups, but really this definition is supposed to be subjective and open-ended to be as inclusive as possible. And then of course, under the Federal Voting Rights Act, there are protected classes, and that includes Latinos, Asians, and African Americans. And while communities of interest may include race, it cannot be the predominant factor in drawing district boundaries, and that's according to the Federal Voting Rights Act. And I wanted to share this slide to show you how diverse and inclusive communities of interest can be, to sort of help you get thinking about your own communities of interest. So here, communities of interest could include historical communities, tourism areas, homeowners or renters, neighborhoods, economic opportunity zones. I usually like to say if you can make the argument that your community is a community of interest, then it likely is. However, under the Fair Maps Act, it does prohibit these three groups from being considered as a community of interest. And that includes political party affiliation, incumbents, and political candidates. And that is there to prevent political gerrymandering and incumbent gerrymandering. So we want to keep this process fair and transparent and above board. And this helps us get there. And then when we're talking about communities of interest, this next group, while it's not prohibited by the Fair Maps Act, it's just incredibly hard to draw this. So groups of similarly minded people who do not share a geographic location or communities of interest that are district-wide or statewide. So when we're drawing lines, we want to make sure that we're not diluting anyone's voice. So we want to keep communities of interest intact as much as possible. And if a community of interest is the entire district, then that's not as helpful for the map drawers. And so we usually like to give people these 3 questions to think about before they give testimony. So the first one, does the community have a shared culture, characteristic, or bond? When it comes to this question, sharing personal stories is really powerful. We've had a lot of people give testimony about how their communities have come together during COVID-19 or have come together during wildfires. So it shows how strong their bond is and what resources they share. But we've also heard testimony about neighborhoods that have come together for annual events. So what sets you apart? What makes you unique from your surrounding areas? And then next is the community geographic in nature. Can you map it? If you have specific boundaries like street names, or maybe there's a landmark, this will help us get a sense of where your community of interest is. So again, we don't dilute their voice. And then finally, what is the community's relationship with the jurisdiction being districted? And then how is it affected by the policy decisions made by the elected officials? So we're going to get into just a couple of examples to help you really understand this idea of community of interest, because it can be a rather difficult concept to grasp. But anyway, a group of renters who live downtown testifies to the Board of Trustees. Would this be considered a community of interest?
Let's say if your presentation is supposed to be advancing, it's not. You're still on the communities of interest critical question. There it is.
Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So thank you for letting me know. If anything else happens, feel free to stop me. So yes, this would be an example of a community of interest. So these are residents who are easily able to be mapped, and they share a common policy interest, which could be addressed through legislation or public services. And I believe this is the last example. A statewide group of people who are fans of the San Francisco Giants testifies to the Board of Trustees. Would this be an example of a community of interest? Unfortunately, it is not. So remember, we want to be able to map them, and this goes beyond the borders of the district. And the jurisdiction, so Foothill-De is a community college district, would need to have some kind of say, influence over this issue. And unfortunately, they do not have any say over the San Francisco Giants. So let's talk about the many ways that you'll be able to give your own testimony. You can give testimony online. You can give testimony tonight in person if you would like. And of course, through drawing maps. So this one you'll be able to find on Foothill-De's website. This is a COI form, so community of interest form. It will ask you step-by-step questions, all the information that we need to know about your community of interest. So fairly simple and quick, and it helps all of us get the information that we need. And then of course we have Districtor. So Districtor helps us get 2 different types of input from the community. So the first is community of interest maps, and that is being accepted now till the end of the process. Of course, you'll be able to draw your own maps of the district if you want. So district-based plans based on the data, the 2020 data. And again, because of COVID-19, everyone in the country is about 9 months behind schedule. So I do want to just reiterate how important it is for folks to get their maps and their other forms submitted as soon as possible to help us in this process. So while the data is still being worked on at the moment, we do expect it to be finalized by September 20th. And maybe that day or a few days after, you'll be able to start drawing your own district maps. And I'll show you guys how to do that at the end of this presentation. So this is how you get there. It's fantastic. It's fairly user-friendly. It was created by Tufts University specifically for community members to draw their own maps. And then this is the Board of Trustees timeline for public hearings related to redistricting. So obviously today is the first day to gather community input. October 4th is the next opportunity. December 13th is when we'll have draft maps out to folks. The public, again, is encouraged to give their input, say if they think lines should be drawn in a different way. And they'll be able to do the same thing on January 10th. So again, the public is encouraged to be a part of this every single step of the way. And then February 14th is when we expect to hopefully have the approval of the final maps and sequencing. And all of this information you'll be able to find on the website here. And I believe the next one. So this is the legacy data for Foothill-De Community College. If you look, hopefully you guys can, it's not too small, but the population that we're dealing with is about 448,859 people. And this is before the finalized data. But given that you guys don't have a state prison within your district, there's a good chance that this won't change very much. Maybe you'll gain a couple hundred people or so. So that's an estimate of where we're at. And then if you divide it by 5, you'll get the about what we're shooting for each district if we're going to keep it relatively equal in size. With that, that is the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take questions now or do Districtor now and take questions at the end of everything. Completely up to you guys.
We do have one member of the public who wishes to address this item. And why don't I ask him if he would like to comment now or after you demonstrate Districtor. The person who said he wants to speak is Ken Horowitz. Ken, do you want to comment now?
No, I'd like to hear a little bit more.
Okay, so why don't you go ahead and give us a demonstration of Districtor and then we'll hear from Ken.
Great. Okay, 1 second. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so Foothill-De will be getting their own Districtor hopefully by Wednesday, no later than this week. So you'll have your own districtor map where folks can draw according to the district. Unfortunately, we don't have that right now. So let me pull up a city that we can draw off of, and we'll draw communities. So I'm just going to pick a random city. So you'll see that there are these buttons up here, and this hand allows you to move the map, and you'll be able to scroll in using your mouse or these two buttons. So this backs up, this goes forward. This brush allows you to draw on the map. So you'll be able to, this is how you'll be able to actually draw. You can change the size of the tool as well. So if you want to draw like 100 of these at a time, and these are census blocks. So these are what are given to us by the US Census. Or you can, if you've drawn too much, you can delete them as well using this eraser button. And just like the brush, you can do a whole bunch at the same time, or do one, get really specific and erase one at a time. And this magnifying glass, it allows you to look at the demographics and population of each census block to give you a sense of what you're drawing. And of course, since we're all multifaceted people, you can draw multiple communities of interest as well. But first, let me actually name this. So you can name your community of interest. So neighborhood. And then again, think about those questions that I asked earlier. What makes your community unique? What makes it different from the surrounding areas? And how is it impacted by the Foothill-De Community College District and the policy decisions made by the Board of Trustees? So you'll want to put that in the description box. And then when you do that, you can draw your next community of interest. And you can overlap them as well, so you don't have to worry about that. Let me make it a little larger. So if they do overlap, that's totally fine. And then you'll want to name that as well and describe it. If there's a particular area or a place of interest, you can put it on the map. So if it's something that your community revolves around, parks actually tend to be a pretty big community of interest point, then I would put that on the map and say why it's important to your community, and if applicable, why it's impacted by the Board of Trustees. And again, you can do multiple of those as well. You just click new and draw another one. And then we have these data layers as well. So you'll be able to see the population as well. And then you can evaluate the community of interest. So here's the first one, and you can see how large it is. This citizen voting age population, it's the numbers that we use to see if there is a Voting Rights Act Section 2 compliance. So that's why we have that in there as well. And then when you're all done, you're just going to hit save, and you'll tag it for Foothill-De Community College District. When the college district gets their own districtor, it will go directly to a gallery and we'll be able to see it instantly, and it'll be instant public testimony. So it's super simple. But you can also copy this and it will take you directly to what we were working off of. So everything that we just did will be here. And then I'm also happy to show you how to, let me go back, how to draw districts as well, because it's a little different. Draw district. So this city has 3 different city council members. You'll see that it now gives us only 3 different brushes to work off of, 3 colors. So Foothill-De is going to get 5 of them. And then it also, I love this so much. It tells you the ideal population and when you reach it. And then it tells you the population, the unassigned population. And it also tells you the max deviation. So the max deviation that we're looking for is 10% or less. So again, this is really user-friendly. It's designed to help people draw their own maps to share with their elected officials. So, oops, I went over. So I'm just going to delete that. So you can see right here, this line is the amount that we are shooting for. And I want to show you guys this because you can see that the max deviation is changing over here. So now we're at almost 5%. So this would be like fairly equal in size. And I do want to emphasize that you are more than welcome to draw the entire district if you want. However, if you want to draw just 1 seat that's important to you, you're more than welcome to submit that. You do not need to do all 5 seats for Foothill-De or trustees if you do not think that that's what you would like to testify on. So again, you would just hit save and you would save it to the gallery once it's up and running, and we will get that through the website. So that is how you use this Districtor program. Highly encourage folks to play around with it. We will be at these presentations in the future as well. So we'll be here to take questions now or in the future. But we'll be giving the same spiel at the October 4th event as well, and happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Right. Currently, we only have 1 speaker, and that's Ken Horowitz. If anybody else in the meeting wishes to speak, please go into chat and identify yourself. Say you want to speak to item 13, but pending that, Ken, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, thank you. I have 1 question and then 1 comment that's somewhat related, but maybe not. I live in the district. Does this require a vote of the residents of the district on the redistricting plan? Or is it just something that is approved by the trustees?
You want to handle that, Liz, or do you want us to handle it?
I believe it's voted on by the Board of Trustees. So, but Chair, if you know better.
As of January 1st, and we will be adopting ours after January 1st, it will be explicitly clear because of new legislation that this can be done without a vote of the electorate. It can be approved by the local area formation committee, the county level jurisdiction. That answer your question? Ken?
Yeah, thank you. And just my only comment, it's sort of not related to redistricting, but I wondered if the trustees would consider an amendment to this plan to include term limits. Term limits. Southwest Community College District in 2018 passed a term limits measure. They got 88% of the vote in favor of limiting the terms of the trustees. So I'm wondering if it's possible to include term limits as part of this redistricting plan. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it. Interesting idea. I don't see anybody else who wishes to speak on item 13. So I guess I'm going to close the public hearing. Thank you, Liz, for your presentation. We'll see you again in just a few weeks, actually.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
But essentially,
President Landsberger, I have questions, please.
Sure. If there are board members who've got questions, I guess now's the time to ask.
Thank you. I was waiting very patiently, and thank you, Liz, for the thorough presentation. I really appreciate it. I apologize that you didn't answer some of the questions in the presentation, but it was going quite rapid. So I apologize if I ask them again, because I want to take some notes. So we do have the 2020 legacy data population numbers, and I'm also looking at it from a cell phone like President Wynn, and it was very hard to read that, and I'm sure maybe staff can get me a copy of that. What was the exact number of the population?
Yeah.
Was 400,040?
Let me look at the presentation really fast, and we can get you an analysis of what your district looks like, but the population is 400,000 or 448,859.
Okay, and you don't have the current voting population of the 448,859, do you?
We do have that.
May I have that number, please?
Yes, so the total CVAP, so the citizen voting age population number, is 248,181.
And both of these number data points are for the 2020 legacy data for our district.
That's right. So it will have some changes coming September 20th or so.
Okay, and it goes right into my next question. So on September 20th, the last part of the three-part of data that Redistricting Partners is looking for will come on September 20th. How many days do you perceive that the thing will go live? Within 7 days of September 20th or less?
So you're talking about the finalized data when that will be live?
Yeah, so that
Okay.
constituents can, or communities of interest can draw the map.
So the state has a database where these numbers will be live theoretically on the 20th.
Okay.
And then we probably need a couple days to analyze. And Kimmy, my colleague here, is if I'm answering anything that's a little off, let me know. But usually we expect a couple days needed to digest it, and we'll get you back that information as quick as possible.
So 7 days is quite reasonable.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. And then my next question is that, for example, if there was a trustee who's up in 2022 and that particular district is up, or he or she does not run, and you might end up with 6 trustees, what happens then? If the person's at large decides not to run in his or her seat for that trustee area, that person will obviously get to serve until 2024. Mm-hmm. That may cause an even number of trustees. What would happen in this scenario?
So I'm not entirely sure how you as a board are planning on sequencing the election, but it will be staggered. So what we will be dealing with is some folks who will be up for election, right, in 2022, and then some folks who will serve out the rest of their term. So I don't believe that there will be six at one time. It should stick to 5.
Just for clarity, everybody serves out their term that they were elected for. So the board will coordinate the numbering of the districts to correlate with that. So
And
that
who
you
was
don't
that? I'm
have-
sorry. I didn't catch who the person was.
Oh, I'm Kimmy Shigatani. Sorry, I'm with Redistricting Partners.
Okay, so thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And then my next question is that on communities of interest. Foothill-De was sued by a Latino person claiming that there was a discrimination. Obviously, we want to address that concern as first, and I saw that with the mapping tool, it's very, very detailed. So, for example, the Latino population in our district is predominantly in the northern part of our district over 2 different cities. It will be very hard to get a 50% majority of the Latino population. My question to redistricting partners is that what percentage does the California Redistricting Act that we need in order to suffice that criteria to make sure that there's it wouldn't be a predominantly Latino population, but maybe, I don't know, 40% Asian, maybe 30% white, and maybe 30% Latino. I'm not doing the math correct, even though I'm Asian, but I'm saying that you won't reach 50%. At what percentage should a Latino population be to meet that requirement?
Yeah, so under the Federal Voting Rights Act, if there is a population that can be drawn that is about 50% CVAP minority population, then that would be considered a Section 2 compliance issue. So it has to do with the citizen voting age population more so than the total population. So if a population has influence over the election, then that's when you would start essentially having to draw these districts that will allow these minority populations to have a voice on who they're electing.
So just kind of reinterpreting what you said is that we can look at the citizen voting population at Latino and try to get it as close to 50% as possible. And that will, in theory, meet that requirement by the Federal Civil Rights Act.
As long as the lawyers have determined that is a Section 2 issue, compliance issue, then yes.
Okay, you did a very good job in answering my question. And then my final question is on February 14th is the planned voting for the final map for Foothill-De. Obviously, our election is not until November. And if the governor were to prolong it, let's say that it was prolonged. What is the last possible date that we need to approve this map by law? If we can't, if we don't get the data or whatever, if it goes beyond February 14th, what's the ultimate last day if our election is in November?
Yeah, Kimmy, do you know the answer to that one?
So there's statute around the County Office of Education. And so they have a February 28th deadline for you to submit your plans to them. So whether that deadline could get extended, we're actually all a little unclear right now because it would require the county offices of ed to extend those deadlines. In addition to that, your county will have a filing deadline for any changes in lines. And that's typically in April or May, depending on the county. And that's so that they can make sure that everything's ready to go for the November primary, for the November general election. So Really, though, as a college district, you're looking at February 28th as sort of the drop dead deadline, which is one of the reasons why the timeline is sort of ends on February 14th with a final vote.
Fantastic. And the only change would be that if the governor was to extend it, that's the only extension that we will get.
Yeah, and right now, the only conversation has been around extending the deadline for cities with primaries and counties, because they all have primaries in the spring. And so I don't know if that extension will sort of trickle down to the K-12s and the CCDs and special districts and all the other folks who have later deadlines.
Understood. Thank you very much to both Liz and Kimmy for answering all of my questions. I really appreciate it.
Of course, that's what we're here for.
Any other board members? Okay.
Nothing. President Landsberger, I'll just say that appreciate everyone's comments tonight, and please continue sharing this information with your constituency groups and any other interested parties, because we are going to, like our presentation indicated, we're going to have more of these listening tours. So I am intently listening along with my colleagues and looking forward to this change. Thank you.
And I would just like to add a comment, President Landsberger. I was on the board when we did review this issue for redistricting, and our board voted not to go through with it because we did have an Asian and a Latina on the board, and we were elected, and the board felt at that time that it wasn't really, we weren't violating it wasn't a problem. But then we did get that, like Trustee Wong said, we did get that threatened lawsuit. And so then we had to, look at the landscape, the legal landscape. And even if we fought this, we would lose. So, and I think the city of Santa Monica is fighting this issue, and they've spent millions on legal fees, and they're appealing, and we just didn't want to do that. So we're following the statute, we're following the law, and that's why we're going through this process.